Hey everybody, this is Dr. Maples. We're going to continue our lectures on content analysis. So what might we analyze in a content analysis? Well, here's the thing. You could literally analyze almost anything that's out there, especially stuff that is in a media format that might be floating around the internet, that you might find in archives and more. These are great because you can analyze almost anything that interests you. Now, I will say there's two common categories. First is texts, and these include documents, emails, historical documents, historical information. They can include books, scripts, notes, cell phone texts. Anything that is word-oriented is something that's certainly up for being analyzed. And think about this. If you're analyzing a text, it's not very different from analyzing what you might do in an interview or observation. Again, you could be coding those words that you see. Now, you can also do content analysis on media, and this is where you translate that media into your descriptive codes. That could be incidents of things occurring, ideas, and so forth, and that could include YouTube videos, websites, games, Facebook data, Instagrams, tweets, and more. And notice that some of those media also may already be text, like a Facebook post is media, but it's also kind of text. And so, again, these are actually very straightforward in the sense of analyzing them. Now, the cool thing between text and media is that text is, again, very much like the interview text or an observation field note that you would analyze. With media, it's a little more like the observation because you're needing to translate what you see into the information that you would code. Now, you're not going to watch the video and take field notes of it. No, you're instead going to be just identifying information that fits into the codes. So let's go a little deeper into that. Is it qualitative or quantitative? Well, the cool thing is it actually can be both. Let's pretend that we wanted to analyze some YouTube videos of people making purchases in a corner store. And by the way, yes, that is an entire corner of YouTube dedicated to people buying stuff if you haven't seen those. So there's a couple of different ways that you might do that. One qualitative, one quantitative. You could quantify the products that are purchased. You could do that by categories. So now you have some categorical data. You could quantify the amount that's spent. You could look at the time that's spent. You could look at word counts of how often they say certain phrases or ideas or things like that. You could even quantify how many times certain things happen, like the clerk says something or they decide not to purchase an item because it's too expensive. Anytime we're counting, then we're dealing with quantitative data. And so this is a great way where you could take YouTube data and immediately turn that into quantitative data. You could also do qualitative here because you could look at the reasons why they might purchase a certain product. Is it because it reminds them of their childhood? Is it something that they've purchased before? Or is it something that they purchased because they feel it's a good value? These are all codes that could be used to try and understand how and why and what is happening. So it can be quantitative or it can be qualitative. And let me take this a step further and dig into my own research. Content analysis is also something where we can indirectly look at the impacts of humans being present but not being present any longer. One of the studies that I really loved when I was at the University of Tennessee was a study that some undergraduates did in archaeology to go through the library and identify and find all these bits of trash, bits of information, tools, and all sorts of other things that people had left behind in the library stacks. And this is everything from book bags to purses to laptops to technology. There was some phones, USB cables, wrappers, notes, all sorts of things. And then they collected all this stuff and tried to analyze some of the thematic ideas behind it. It was really cool because it indirectly looks at the presence of people that aren't present there any longer. Well, I actually do this with my own research, looking at leave no trace in outdoor recreation areas. Now, just to introduce that, leave no trace is the idea that you go into the outdoors and that you don't interact with the environment in a way that impacts it more than you normally would. If you're ever interested, by the way, in leave no trace, that is something that I can teach and talk about, so feel free to reach me. There's also a certificate that you can get if you're interested. But with leave no trace, the whole idea is that we want to make sure our behaviors create as little impact on the environment as possible. Let's pretend that I wanted to do a qualitative context of the products that are left behind in natural forest trails. I could make counts, I could make descriptions, I could look at what was found in these areas and link that to areas that are seeing too much use. So now I'm looking at the indirect presence. I could even go back in time and do archaeological research or archival research, either one, for how Ellis Island is used. For those who are not familiar, Ellis Island was a major port of entry for immigrants in New York, New Jersey area. I can't remember if I think it might technically be in New Jersey, but I can't recall. It's right there on the edge. But I could look at this, do a content analysis of media dealing with Ellis Island to try and understand how immigrants used the space. So I could look at the historical photos to look at the wear patterns on floors or walls to understand how they've interacted with it. I could examine the materials on site today, things that they might have in their archives. I could look at pictures. I could look at the architectural history about what was changed and when and why. Anything to try and understand how we interact with a space. So this is cool because this kind of gives us a chance to look backwards. And remember, content analysis is really, if you're wanting to look back in time, it's your one shot to do that. We can survey people and ask them how they felt about a period before now. We could do the same thing with interviews, observations, not so much, unless we were watching videos of them, and then that would actually be doing a content analysis rather than an observation. So content analysis is your really one clean shot to look backwards in time. Now, it's exciting because content analysis, for all these cool things, they function effectively the same way. The only thing is different is it's secondary data. We're using someone else's data, and that data can be anything. In the next lecture, we're going to dig into that a little bit more, and we're also going to look into an example study that we might do using content analysis. So if you have questions, if you have concerns, you reach out to me. Otherwise, I'm going to see you in the next lecture. Take care.